In this video, I will try to explain case study research design. Before talking about case study, I would like to share the key resources on case study research. Yin's book entitled as Case Study Research Design and Methods. It is a very important resource on case study research. So if you intend to do case study research, you should consult this resource. There are some other resources as well, and you may look into those resources to understand the nature of case study and essentials of case study. So case study, what is case study? The word case study has come from the word case. What is a case? A case can be a person, a case can be a group of persons, or an event, or a place, or a phenomenon. So case study may be defined as the study or the in-depth study of a person, a group of persons, an event, a place, or a phenomenon over a certain period of time. So this definition, this is the simplest way of defining a case study. And this definition indicates that case study is time bound. It is contextual in nature, it is time bound, it is space bound also. So case study is basically it is an in-depth study. Sometimes people use the term case study as a general category for research that is not a survey, an observational study, or an experiment and is not statistical in nature. This is a very general way of defining the case study. It is a general way. Well, this kind of description tries to eliminate the studies which are not case studies. For example, experimental or observational studies, they are not case studies. So this is a very general way. So it is always better to be specific when we are trying to define case study. When to use the case study? That is an important question. When should we be using the case study? Actually, there is no formula. There is no formula when and how on when to use case study. The choice depends largely on the researcher's research question or questions. For example, if the questions seek to explain some circumstances, some present circumstances, for example, how or why some social phenomenon works, the more that case study research will be, the more case study research will be relevant. So if you are trying to explain something in depth, and your focus is more on how and why questions related to a social phenomenon, then case study research will be relevant study. The case study is more relevant if the research questions require an extensive and in-depth description of some social phenomenon. If the research question doesn't require an extensive and in-depth description, then maybe you can apply descriptive research design instead of choosing case study. Case study is used when the researchers want to understand complex social phenomena. Sometimes students get confused with with the use of the word phenomenon in case study. They assume that the word phenomenon is specific to phenomenology. In fact, phenomenology refers to a study of people's experiences. The study doesn't particularly try to understand the phenomenon. Rather, the study intends to understand the experiences of the people who experience a phenomenon. On the other hand, the case study, it intends to understand complex social phenomena. Um, for example, different programs, different activities, they have certain variables. We will talk about them in next few slides also. So social phenomena are very complex, and case study tries to understand those complex phenomena. You can see the reference of Yin's book here. So Yin's book on case study is a very important resource. So let's see different case study researches. Case study research sometimes focuses on an individual representative of a group. For example, a female principal, life of a female principal in a Pakistani school, a private sector school or a public sector school, or the work of a female principal in a private sector school of Pakistan or of Lahore or in some rural area. So the focus can be on individual representative. More often, however, it is important to notice that more often case study addresses a phenomenon, for example, a particular event, situation, program, or activity. Most of the times, many people assume that case study is study of individuals or study of a group of people. In fact, most of the times, case study addresses a phenomenon, not a person or group of persons. For example, a school administrator might want to learn about, to understand what happens in his district during a transition from face-to-face teaching mode to blended teaching mode. So the person may be interested in understanding the event of transition. So it is not a study of a person or group of persons, rather the study of a transition, study of an event. So we need to be very clear that case study is not always study of a person or group of persons. It is study of events, study of activities or situations or programs. There is another example. A teacher may be interested in exploring the factors that influence student attrition at her school. So I've highlighted it in a purple color that a case study may be done to explore the factors that influence student attrition in a school. So this is study of a situation. If a researcher is exploring the factors that influence student attrition, it means that it is a study, it is a case study of a situation. Another example, a researcher may desire to learn more about employment practices at his or her institution. So employment practices, their institutions have employment programs, and the researchers may study those programs. A technology specialist may seek greater insights into decision-making processes that influence the adoption of software programs in his organization. So decision-making processes. So decision-making is an activity. A researcher may be interested in studying that activity to develop greater insights into that activity, that is decision-making processes. So these examples indicate that case study is not always study of people, of a person, of a single person or a group of persons. Rather, it can be study of an event, a situation, a program, or an activity. The topics of case study research vary widely. For example, an event that occurred on campus or a situation that has particular relevance for a researcher would be appropriate areas for case study. Similarly, case study researchers are also interested in studying programs or activities that are of special interest. So this is an Hancock. This book is again a very relevant book for the researchers, particularly in the field of education. So what are the features of case study? The phenomenon being researched is studied in its natural context, bounded by space and time. The administrator's investigation of blended learning occurs in a specific school system during a specific time period. I have just mentioned in the previous slides, I mentioned these different examples that a school administrator might want to learn about what happens in his district during a transition from face-to-face teaching to blended mode of teaching. So this investigation and all other investigations, they are all time bound. So let's see uh, uh, time and space specificity of these different researches. The teacher's study of factors influencing student attrition is grounded in her particular school. Again, it is space bound. During a particular academic year, the researcher will not study the attrition of her students of the students in a particular school for um, uh, for 20 years or for 10 years. Maybe she would be interested in studying only in one academic year, or maybe in 5 years, in the past 5 years. So the researcher needs to specify the time during which the study will be done. So it is highly time and space bound. So the other example, the technology specialist will restrict his investigation of software adoption procedures to his own organization's practices since the purchase of a computer mainframe. Or the researcher may specify some other time bar. So again, this is an example that shows that case study is essentially space and time bound. Context. When we say that case study is contextual in nature, context means space and time. No case study can be done uh, without contextual considerations. It is unlike natural sciences. For example, water boils at 100 degrees centigrade in Pakistan, it boils at 100 degrees centigrade in the USA, it boils at 100 degrees centigrade in the UK and in other parts of the world, except at high altitudes. So in these cases, in these cases, the in natural sciences, researches are not time bound. They are not specific space and time bound. They are not contextual. Context doesn't affect the results of a study. The context doesn't affect the boiling point of water, but context does affect the results of a case study. People living in Pakistan, a principal, a female principal who is working in Pakistan, if you are going to study her her work or her routine, certainly its results would be different from the person who is working in the UAE or in Nigeria or in other parts of the world. So one of the main feature of case study research is that it is space and time bound. Context is extremely important when you are doing a case study, and the case researchers need to explain the context of the study in detail when they write their research report. So you can see that a case needs to be explained in the context. In the immediate context, the place where the research is being done and the time frame. Sometimes researchers extend this context to the social context, society. Many times researchers just study a case in a particular context. They do not go beyond that and do not make a link with the social practices. They do not try to understand the case in the larger social practices, but many times, actually, there are some researchers who are interested in understanding a case in the larger social context. So another feature of case study research is that case study research is richly descriptive because it is grounded in deep and varied sources of information. When you do case study, you collect data from different sources of information. You collect data from different people. You may collect data from different other sources like attendance records or documents or observation. So when you write a case study report, the case study researchers employ quotes of the participants, anecdotes, and other literary techniques to create mental images to understand the complexity of the many variables inherent in the phenomenon being studied. So we need to remember that whenever we study a social phenomenon, here we have discussed different examples. One example was the transition from face-to-face teaching to blended mode of teaching. So transition is a social phenomenon and it is very complex. There would be different variables involved in that social phenomenon. So when we say different variables could be age, experience, age of the teachers, age of the students even, maybe students of high school, children, a student of high school would find blended learning more effective as compared to the children of the primary school, or it could be otherwise round. Maybe it is the age of the teachers which emerges as a variable. It may be experience of the teachers which emerges as a variable. So the case study researchers try to understand the complexity of many variables inherent in the phenomenon being studied. I've given the example again. The administrator, if they like in the case of transition example, the administrator illustrates the transition from traditional to blended learning with school attendance records, focus group interviews, surveys, and end of grade achievement scores. So you can see that there are different sources of information. There is not single source of information. There is not only focus group interviews, there is not only surveys or end of grade achievements, rather there are different sources of information. That's why case study research is richly descriptive because the data come from different sources, and it is important to collect data from different sources because if we do not collect data from different sources, then we will not be able to understand the complexity of the many variables. Okay? So a high school teacher, the other example is a high school teacher presents statements from her students and their parents to illustrate why some people drop out of school. So in this example also, data would come from the parents as well as from the people who drop out from the school. So the data will be it will be richly descriptive in nature. So a case study allows investigators to focus on a case, one case. A case can be an event, a case can be an activity, a program, a person or group of persons. So a case study allows investigators to focus on a case and retain a holistic and real-world perspective, such as in studying individual life cycles, small group behavior, organizational and managerial processes, neighborhood change, school performance, international relations, and the maturation of industries. So these are different areas which can be studied through case study because it allows the investigators to focus on a case in its holistic and real world perspective. insights gleaned from case studies can directly influence policy, procedures, and future research. It is so important. Case study research is very, very important because the findings of the case study develops insights of the policymakers and other researchers, and these insights can directly influence future policy and procedure and even further research. So case study is an important kind of study as it develops people insights that has an impact on future policy and devising certain procedures for organizations and at national level. So now we are going to see what are different types of case study. There are three kinds of case studies. The first one, explanatory case study, then descriptive case study, and then exploratory case study. So let's see um, how do they differ from each other. Explanatory case study. Explanatory case study tries to investigate causal links, deals with the why of a situation. So when we say that it tries to investigate causal links, some people get confused with this statement. They think that causal links are studied through experimental or quasi-experimental studies. Causal link means where you establish cause and effect relationship. So if you intend to establish some sort of cause and effect relationship, then appropriate method would be an experimental study or quasi-experimental study. So case studies cannot serve this purpose. There are researchers who think that uh, um, explanatory case studies can help in developing or can help in understanding the causal links. For example, if a teacher is interested in understanding the factors which are responsible for dropout of the students, the teacher may the teacher may interview students and may interview the parents as well, and may come to a conclusion stating that there are certain linkages between different causes and effects. There are some factors which lead to drop out of the student. So a researcher may say that after an in-depth study, after collecting rich data, this researcher has been able to establish some sort of causal links. If the researcher does the same study, but the focus is just on exploration, in identifying the factors which are the reasons for the dropout of the student, then that would be exploratory case study. But if the researcher reaches to a conclusion and states that, well, through the rich data, descriptive data, the researcher has come to know that there are some links between some factors and dropout, then it will be an explanatory case study. So um, the, uh, the researchers who research with a positivist or post-positivist lens, they think that such kind of causal links cannot be established through case study. They criticize such kind of practices because they believe that causal links can only be developed or can only be established through experimental or quasi-experimental research. They want some kind of experimental activity to reach to such kind of conclusions. So in short, explanatory case study deals with the why of a situation where the researcher is interested in identifying the cause of a certain effect. So the next one, exploratory case study, a case study uh, which aims at identifying the research questions or procedures to be used in a subsequent research study, which might or might not be a case study. So I again go back to the same example. that where a researcher is interested in investigating the link between certain factors, link between dropout and other factors. So a researcher may do an exploratory case study. When the researcher would be doing exploratory case study, then the researcher will not establish a causal link between dropout and students' health or any other factor. Instead, the researcher would just leave the exploratory case study research may lead to this finding, but the uh, the finding will not be very much rigid and will not be saying that there is a causal link. However, the experimental researchers may pick this conclusion and design their own study to see if there is some kind of causal link between these two factors or not. So exploratory case studies are done to actually the findings of exploratory case study may be used in a subsequent research study, which might or might not be a case study. There could be experimental study, there could be some surveys which follow the findings of an exploratory case study. So the third kind of case study is descriptive case study. Descriptive case studies deal with the how of a situation. Descriptive case studies can serve many purposes, such as presenting a rarely encountered situation or one not normally accessible to researchers. Most of the times, researchers are interested in conducting descriptive case studies. A case study whose purpose is to describe a phenomenon, the case, in its real world context. So there are some examples of different kinds of case studies. I have just taken the examples from these are the examples which I have already quoted. Here we will use those examples, the same examples, to understand the type of case study that will be done, the type of the case study. A teacher may be interested in exploring the factors that influence student attrition at her school. I have already explained that the researcher may be interested in conducting explanatory or exploratory case study while exploring the factors that influence student attrition. Don't be confused with the word exploring here. It is acceptable that the word exploring indicates that it will be an exploratory study, but it can be done through explanatory mode of case study. A researcher may desire to learn more about employment practices at his or her institution. So this kind of research would be a descriptive study. Similarly, if a researcher is interested in understanding the life of a female school principal, or the life of a married female school principal in Lahore or in some other area, specific area, then that will again be a descriptive case study. So now I'm going to talk about case study designs. So there are, Jin has proposed a matrix of 2 by 2 case study design. You can see that on the top it is single case and multiple case, and in the first column it is holistic unit of analysis and then embedded multiple units of analysis. So the first one is very clear that when it is a single case, the researchers in fact study a case in its original context. When we say original context, means space and time, in the context of space and time. So researchers may study one single case, or researchers may compare the cases or can study multiple cases. So that would be comparative case study. Let's come to the next row, this one. So here you can see that it is study of one case under the given context. However, the case is not simple. Unit of analysis is 1 and 2. So it is a single case study, but analysis unit of analysis is not single case. There are two unit of analysis for one case. For example, if a researcher is trying to explore the relationship of a university, of a public sector university, with other public sector universities, or with other with some research institute besides its own university. So if a researcher is interested in studying the relationship of a university with some research institute or with some industry, then the unit of analysis will not be only the university. The researcher will need to collect data from that industry as well, with which the university has some kind of linkage, because the researcher will not be able to understand the relationship of one university with the other one uh, unless the data comes from that industry as well. So unit of analysis would be two. So same, you can see here that when it comes to multiple cases, so multiple cases are also studied with different unit of analysis. There could be 1, 2 or 3 units of analysis. So this is a simple matrix of a case study. Among the specific case study design, 4 major types follow a 2 by 2 matrix. Although single case studies can yield invaluable insights, most multiple case study designs are likely to be stronger than single case study designs. So, researchers may opt to do single case studies, but multiple case studies are considered stronger than single case study designs. Trying to use even a two-case design is therefore a worthy objective compared to doing a single case study. So here is an advice for the new researchers, that when they are conducting a case study, they should be doing two-case design instead of just focusing on single case design, study, single case study design. So in this video, I spoke about the definition of case study, and then I tried to explain the concept of case study research with certain examples. The most important consideration while planning to do case study is your research question. In fact, the research question guides what kind of research design a researcher needs to apply. So if the researcher is interested in understanding uh, something in depth, then the researcher can apply case study design. There are different kinds of case study types: exploratory, explanatory, and descriptive. There are certain key features of a case study, and the most important key feature is that a case study is always contextual. It means it is always space and time bound. And then there are different designs which are used by case study researchers, and the final thing is, the final thought regarding case study is that multiple case study designs are considered strong designs as compared to single case study.